The room was suffocating. The faint, flickering candlelight barely illuminated the dark corners of my study, casting elongated shadows on the walls, where memories of happier times now seemed like ghosts, silent reminders of what had once been. Outside, the night was heavy with rain, the patter of raindrops against the window creating a rhythm that felt almost deliberate, as if nature itself were mocking me. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside, and I could feel the pressure mounting with each passing minute. My name is Raymond. I was a man once defined by love, by the love I had for my wife, Maria. I was someone who believed in commitment, in honesty, and in building something lasting. But tonight, as I sat alone in the study of the old mansion that had once been a sanctuary, I realized just how foolish I had been to place my faith in the wrong people. Maria and I had been married for 5 years. Our love had always been something to admire, at least in the beginning. It was a love that had survived the ups and downs of life, the inevitable challenges of marriage, and the struggles that came with blending families. Or so I thought. But behind closed doors, my marriage was under siege, not from external forces, but from within, specifically from Maria's family. Her parents had always been the type to exert control, to try and shape her life according to their standards. I never questioned them. After all, I respected them. They were family. But it wasn't long before I realized that their respect for me was nothing more than a facade, a mask they wore to disguise their growing disdain. It started subtly. Small comments, offhand remarks about my career, my upbringing, my family. I brushed them off at first, thinking that perhaps they were just protective of Maria, concerned as most parents are. But the whispers grew louder. Maria began to question my every move. She started doubting my decisions, my ability to provide for her and our future. It wasn't long before the relationship I had worked so hard to nurture began to fray at the edges. Then came the day I found the letter. I was alone in the study when I stumbled upon it. It had been left carelessly on the desk, an envelope with my name written on it in Maria's neat handwriting. My heart skipped a beat, for I had not expected any communication from her at that moment. She had been distant, cold in recent days, and I couldn't help but wonder if this letter was her final goodbye. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, already dreading what it might contain. As I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanned the words that had been carefully penned. At first, I thought it was just a letter of concern, an attempt to bridge the gap that had been growing between us. But as I read further, the truth became painfully clear. It was a message from her parents, not directly, but carefully inserted into our communication. Their words, laced with manipulation, slowly took form as they suggested. No, they demanded that Maria rethink her choice in me. "You deserve better," they wrote. "Raymond isn't the man he appears to be." The letter went on, recounting a list of supposed faults, exaggerations of my character, and questions about my motives. They painted a picture of me as an unreliable, unworthy man, someone who couldn't provide, who had failed to meet their expectations. They spoke of my past, twisted it, and presented it as something shameful. The trust I had built over the years seemed to crumble with each line I read. The words hit me like a wave, a surge of pain crashing through me, leaving nothing in its wake but emptiness. Betrayed, humiliated, confused. These were the emotions that flooded my mind, each one taking root in the dark corners of my soul. How could they do this? How could they attack me like this, without so much as a warning? How could they try to ruin everything I had worked for? I sank into the chair behind the desk, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, a sense of powerlessness. And yet, beneath it all, a quiet resolve began to form. If they wanted to destroy me, to ruin my reputation, then I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me fall. Number I would not fall. I would rise, and I would turn the tables on them in a way they could never imagine. The storm outside howled louder, as if the world itself were urging me to make a decision, to act before the damage became irreversible. The days that followed were a blur. Maria had become a shadow of the woman I had once known. Her eyes, once filled with love and admiration, were now clouded with doubt. Every conversation we had felt strained, like walking on a tightrope that could snap at any moment. The distance between us grew each day, the chasm widening as her parents continued to plant seeds of doubt in her heart. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the betrayal that had been wrought against me. I had given them everything: my loyalty, my respect, my trust, and they had repaid me with nothing but lies and manipulation. The very people I had opened my heart to had tried to destroy me, and in that moment, I knew I had to act. But there was something else, something darker, that began to stir inside me. A part of me, hidden beneath the anger and hurt, began to wonder if revenge could give me the closure I so desperately needed. Could I make them feel the pain they had caused me? Could I show them the consequences of their actions in a way that would make them understand the depth of their betrayal? The idea consumed me. It wasn't enough to confront them. Not yet. I needed to be patient. I needed to plan. And plan I did. I spent sleepless nights, pacing the study, my mind racing with ideas. How could I turn the tables? How could I show them that they could not simply destroy me without paying the price? The more I thought about it, the clearer the plan became. First, I would need to gain their trust again, at least for a little while. I would have to let them believe they had won, let them think I had been defeated. Only then would I strike, quietly, methodically, and with precision. I began to plant seeds of doubt in their minds, subtly turning their friends and allies against them. I used the same tactics they had used on me: manipulation, insinuation, small lies designed to create confusion and distrust. I knew their weaknesses, their insecurities, and I would use them against them. Each night, I wrote down my plans, refining them, making sure every detail was in place. The more I plotted, the more obsessed I became. I had never imagined myself as the vengeful type, but the pain they had caused me had pushed me to a place I never thought I would go. I had to make them pay. But as the days went on, I began to question myself. Was this really who I had become? The man who plotted revenge instead of seeking reconciliation? I found myself staring at the letter, now crumpled in my hands, wondering if this was the right path. But the doubt never lasted long. Every time I thought about it, their betrayal seemed to grow larger, darker, more unforgivable. And so, I kept going. I kept planning. The tension in the air had become almost unbearable. Days stretched into weeks, and every conversation with Maria felt like a battle I could not win. Her mind, once clear and filled with trust, had become clouded by the poisonous whispers of her parents. Every time I looked into her eyes, I saw doubt. It was as though she was no longer the woman I had married, the woman who had stood by my side through thick and thin, but a stranger who was now questioning everything we had built together. I had to admit, I was losing her, and that thought gnawed at me, pushing me further down a path I never thought I would walk. I couldn't afford to lose her, but I couldn't continue living in this half-life where I was being torn apart by lies and betrayal. Something had to give, and I realized it was going to be them, not me. I spent weeks crafting my revenge, and now the time had come. The pieces were in place, and I was ready to put my plan into action. It was so simple, so devious that I almost marveled at how easily it all came together. But then again, nothing had been easy. This moment, this reckoning, had been months in the making. Maria had no idea what was about to happen. She thought she was in control, that her parents had won, that the distance between us was insurmountable. But I knew better. She had been so consumed by their influence, so blinded by their manipulation, that she couldn't see what was happening right under her nose. She didn't realize that her parents, in their quest to ruin me, had begun to ruin themselves. I had been watching them, studying their every move. I knew what they wanted, what they needed to feel powerful. Their pride, their sense of superiority, had always been their greatest weakness. They thought they could destroy me with lies and rumors, but they hadn't anticipated that I would be the one to turn their world upside down. It all began with a simple conversation, a casual, seemingly innocent meeting with one of their closest allies. I had spent weeks feeding small bits of information, leading him to believe that Maria's parents were the ones who had orchestrated the rumors about me. The lies, the manipulation, everything that had been said about me had originated from them. He had no reason to doubt it, and soon the whispers began to spread. At first, it was just a murmur, a faint ripple in the background, but soon it gained momentum. People began to talk. As I watched the situation unfold, I felt a strange sense of detachment, almost as if I were a spectator in my own life. The irony was not lost on me. I had spent so much time trying to build my reputation, to prove myself to everyone around me, and now I was watching as the very people who had tried to destroy me were watching their own reputations crumble. The world was turning on them, just as they had tried to turn it on me. But as the day of reckoning drew closer, I began to feel something I hadn't expected: triumph. For a brief moment, I felt a rush of victory, as if I had won some great battle. But it was fleeting. Almost immediately, a strange emptiness settled over me. The very act that had consumed me for so long now felt hollow. I had set the stage, but now that it was happening, I couldn't help but wonder if I had become something I didn't recognize. The first sign that things were spiraling out of control came when Maria confronted me. It was a quiet evening, the kind where nothing seems to happen, but everything does. I was sitting alone in the study when I heard her footsteps. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to tell me that something was wrong. "Raymond," she said, softly, almost hesitantly, "what have you done?" I looked up from my desk, my hands trembling slightly, as I pushed aside the papers I had been working on. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what I had done? How could I tell her that the plan I had put into motion had succeeded? That her parents, the people who had tried to tear us apart, were now in the very position I had once been? "I don't know what you mean," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I knew the truth was written all over my face. "Don't lie to me, Raymond," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I know what you've been doing. I know about the rumors, about the lies you've spread. You've turned everything into a game, and now look at where we are. You've ruined everything." Her words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. I had ruined everything. In my quest for revenge, I had lost sight of what really mattered. I had lost sight of her, the woman I loved. For the first time in weeks, I felt a deep sense of guilt flood over me. The victory I had fought for was nothing more than an illusion. I had destroyed the very thing I had wanted to protect: my marriage. Maria stood there, her eyes filled with tears, and I knew it was over. She was right to be angry, right to be hurt. I had become the person I never wanted to be, and I couldn't undo it. All the plans, all the careful manipulation had led me to this moment, standing alone in the ruins of my own making. "I never wanted this," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I just wanted to make them see what they did to me." Maria shook her head, the pain in her eyes unbearable to watch. "No, Raymond, you wanted to destroy them, and in doing so, you destroyed yourself. And just like that, she was gone. I watched as she walked out of the room, and I knew, deep down, that I had lost her forever. There would be no reconciliation. There would be no happy ending. I had sacrificed everything in pursuit of my revenge, and now I was left with nothing. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The mansion that had once felt like a home now felt like a tomb. The silence was deafening. I spent my days wandering the empty halls, trying to make sense of the life I had destroyed. Maria was gone, and I was left with nothing but the remnants of my own pride and bitterness. The in-laws had fallen from grace, but I had not felt the satisfaction I had imagined. They were no longer the powerful figures they once were, but that victory had come at a steep price. I had won, but I had lost everything that truly mattered. In the quiet of the mansion, I found myself haunted by the same question. Was it worth it? Was the price of vengeance worth the cost? The answer, as I had feared, was no. The vengeance had not healed me. It had not given me peace. It had only left me broken, alone, and adrift in a world that no longer made sense. I sat in the study once again, the room now a shadow of its former self. The papers I had once pored over with such fervour now lay forgotten on the desk, untouched for days. The mansion stood silent around me, its halls empty, its walls heavy with the weight of regret. And I understood, at last, that vengeance had not set me free. It had only bound me in chains that I could never escape. As the days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, the mansion that had once felt so alive with the promise of a shared future now seemed like a grand crumbling relic of a past that I couldn't reclaim. I had built my life around the idea that love and trust were the foundations of everything, and yet I had seen both betrayed by those I had trusted most. Now, in my pursuit of vengeance, I had become a shadow of the man I once was, a man who sought retribution and found only destruction. The in-laws had, in many ways, gotten what they deserved. Their reputations, once polished and admired, had tarnished under the weight of the lies they had told about me. It had been easy, almost too easy, to turn the tables. I had set my plan in motion, and they had fallen for it, stumbling right into the trap I had laid. It had been a thing of beauty, a work of cold, calculated art. But as the pieces of their lives crumbled, I realized that what I had won was not a victory at all. It was just a hollow emptiness, a victory with no substance. And yet, as I stood in the study, staring out the window at the vast empty landscape beyond, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The house, which once rang with the sound of laughter and the rhythm of life, was now eerily quiet. It was as though even the walls themselves had lost their strength, their integrity, like they too were a reflection of my broken spirit. I had always believed that revenge would bring closure, that it would allow me to heal the wounds of betrayal. But as I sat in the study, my fingers running along the wood of the desk, where I had once made plans for a future with Maria, I realized that I had been wrong. No amount of vengeance could heal the damage I had done to myself. No amount of punishment could bring back the woman I had lost. The emptiness was all-encompassing, and it gnawed at me, relentlessly, until I could no longer deny it. I had lost everything. The in-laws had been exposed for their lies and manipulations, but what had I truly gained? Their fall from grace, their humiliation. It had all seemed like justice at the time, but now it felt like nothing more than the bitter taste of ashes in my mouth. The weeks after Maria's departure were the hardest. I had hoped, foolishly, that time would heal the wounds. I thought that the sharp sting of her absence would eventually fade, but it never did. Every corner of the mansion reminded me of her, the way she used to laugh as she walked through the halls, the way she smiled when we shared our hopes for the future. All of it. Gone. I spent my days in the study, poring over old photographs, reminders of the life we had shared. Each image, each moment seemed like a mockery of the man I had become. In the silence of the house, I began to hear the echoes of the past, the mistakes I had made, the moments when I should have walked away, should have stopped before it was too late. But I hadn't. I had let my anger guide me, had let the need for revenge consume me to the point where there was no return. And now I found myself standing in the wreckage, unable to rebuild, unable to fix the destruction I had wrought. I had no one to blame but myself. Maria was gone, and the in-laws had been ruined, but I had sacrificed my own integrity, my sense of self, in the process. I had become the very thing I despised, the vengeful, manipulative figure who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. The very thing I had promised myself I would never be. As I sat there in the study, the weight of it all settled on my shoulders like a heavy burden, and I realized that I hadn't only lost Maria, but I'd lost myself. There was no escaping the consequences of my actions. The plans, the lies, the schemes, all of it had led me here, to this empty, hollow existence. The woman I loved had been pushed away by my need for vengeance. The in-laws had been exposed, their power stripped away. But none of it mattered. I had gained nothing but the bitter taste of regret. In the weeks that followed, I found myself retreating further into the mansion, further into my own mind. The silence became deafening, and the walls seemed to close in on me. There was no one left to talk to, no one to share my thoughts with. Maria was gone, and I was alone in a house that had once been filled with warmth and love. Now it felt like a prison. The revenge I had sought had not brought me peace. Instead, it had left me with an empty shell of the life I once had. I had tried to make them feel the pain they had caused me, but in the end, I was the one who had suffered the most. One night, as I sat alone in the study, the weight of the past few months pressing down on me, I realized that the act of revenge had not given me closure. It had not healed the wounds. It had only deepened them. The pain, the guilt, the regret. It was all too much to bear. I had thought I could control it, thought I could manipulate the situation to my advantage. But now, as I looked at the ruins of everything I had once held dear, I knew that I was the one who had been destroyed in the process. The mansion that had once been a symbol of my life with Maria was now a tomb for my memories. It was a place where I could no longer escape the truth. My quest for revenge had cost me everything. The in-laws had been brought low, their reputations shattered, but at what cost? As I sat there, staring out at the darkness, I realized that vengeance had not been the answer. It had never been the answer. I had lost everything I truly cared about. Maria, my integrity, my peace of mind, all for the fleeting satisfaction of watching them fall. But as I sat in the stillness, I knew that no amount of regret could undo what had been done. The past could not be rewritten, and the mistakes could not be erased. I had been consumed by my need for revenge, and now I would spend the rest of my days living with the consequences. Time, they say, heals all wounds, but I no longer believed in that comforting lie. The wound I had inflicted on myself was too deep, too ingrained in my soul to ever heal. It had become part of me, woven into the very fabric of my existence. The vengeance I had sought, the justice I had believed I was entitled to, had only served to destroy me. Maria had moved on. She had found a new life, a life without me, a life where the poison I had introduced into our marriage no longer had a place. And as for me, I was left behind, haunted by the ghosts of my past actions, cursed by the choices I had made. The mansion, the symbols of the life I had once known, no longer held any meaning. It was simply a reminder of the man I had become. the man who had lost everything. In the end, I understood the harsh truth. Revenge is never truly sweet. It never brings the satisfaction you expect. It only leaves you hollow, empty, and full of regret. I had sought to punish them, to make them feel the pain I had felt, but in the process, I had destroyed myself. Now I am left with nothing but the ruins of my own making, a man who sought justice and found only misery. The price of vengeance is steep, and I have paid it in full. The days had become indistinguishable from one another, the same silence, the same emptiness, the same suffocating loneliness. I woke up each morning with no purpose, no motivation, only the echo of my own thoughts. The house was still grand, still magnificent in its decay, but it felt like a monument to failure. I had once envisioned it as a symbol of my success, a place where Maria and I would grow old together, where our love would flourish in the tranquility of our own creation. But now, it stood as a testament to everything I had lost. My love, my integrity, and the very essence of who I once was. The pain of her absence gnawed at me like a persistent wound, and I could feel it growing deeper with every passing day. There were moments when I tried to forget her, to push her out of my mind, but her memory had rooted itself in every corner of this house. I could still hear her laugh, her gentle voice calling my name, the way she used to touch my arm when we walked together. Those moments were now distant echoes that seemed to mock me. How foolish I had been to think I could destroy someone else's life without destroying my own in the process. It was late one night when the weight of my actions finally became too much to bear. I sat alone in the study, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the desk. The candlelight flickered before me, casting erratic shadows across the walls, but I didn't pay attention. My thoughts were consumed by the same realization I had been avoiding for months. The person who had truly been destroyed by all of this was me. It wasn't the in-laws who had fallen from their pedestal. It wasn't even Maria, who had chosen to walk away from the wreckage of our marriage. It was me. I had become the villain in my own story, and I couldn't undo the damage I had caused. I had traded my soul for a fleeting moment of revenge, and now I was paying the price. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes, trying to block out the overwhelming wave of regret that washed over me. The weight of it was unbearable, crushing me under its intensity. In the stillness of the room, I realized that the pain I felt was self-inflicted. I had walked into this trap willingly, driven by my own pride and bitterness. And now I was left with the ruins of a life that could never be repaired. The house felt colder now, the darkness of the evening settling in like a heavy fog. I had not seen Maria in months, and yet I could not shake the desire to reach out to her. I had hurt her, yes. I had betrayed her trust in ways that words could not adequately explain. But a part of me still held on to the hope that I could make things right. That perhaps, after everything, there was still a chance for us to rebuild. If only I could find a way to apologize, to show her that I was not the man who had plotted revenge, but a man who had lost his way. And so, I did the only thing I could think to do. I wrote to her. I penned a letter, carefully, thoughtfully, each word weighted with the realization of the damage I had caused. I poured my heart into it, acknowledging the hurt I had caused, taking full responsibility for my actions. I knew it would never be enough, but it was the only thing I could offer her now. The letter was short, but its weight was immense. Maria, I wrote, I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I think I deserve it. But I need you to know that the man who did all those things, the man who plotted, who hurt, who deceived, he's not who I want to be. I was lost. I was blinded by my pride and my pain. And in trying to hurt others, I ended up destroying the only thing that truly mattered to me. You. I wish there were a way to undo the past, but I know there isn't. I don't expect you to come back. I don't expect anything, but I do hope, in some small way, you can find peace. And maybe one day, you will remember me for who I truly was, before I lost myself. I sealed the letter with a heavy heart and sent it, not knowing what the future would hold. But there was something in me, something small, fragile, that still believed in the possibility of redemption. Maybe she would never read it. Maybe it would only bring more pain. But I had to try. I had to offer something, even if it was just the truth. Months passed, and life moved on for everyone but me. The mansion stood empty, save for the memories that continued to haunt its halls. I spent my days wandering through the house, lost in the ghosts of what could have been. Maria was gone. The in-laws had been exposed, and their once powerful influence had crumbled. And yet, none of it had brought me the peace I had so desperately sought. The letter I had written never received a response. Perhaps that was for the best. Perhaps the closure I sought was something that could never be given to me. I had wanted her to forgive me, to return to me, but I had already destroyed the possibility of that. I had wanted justice, and in seeking it, I had burned every bridge that could have led to healing. And so, the mansion stood as a silent witness to my downfall. The walls, which had once echoed with laughter and love, now held only the weight of my regret. There would be no redemption, no second chance. I had forfeited them both the moment I chose revenge over forgiveness. As the seasons changed, the mansion's decay mirrored the state of my soul. The once vibrant life I had imagined for myself was now just a series of broken pieces scattered across the floor. Pieces I could never put back together. The house, the love, the trust, all of it was gone. There was no great lesson to be learned here, no heroic comeback. There was only me, a man broken by his own choices, wandering the empty halls of a life that no longer existed. In the end, I came to understand that revenge is not sweet. It doesn't heal. It doesn't make you stronger. It only leaves you hollow, empty, and alone. And no matter how hard you try, you can never undo the damage it causes. I had thought that by making them suffer, I would find peace. But instead, I found only the silence of my own broken soul. And as I looked out the window, watching the world continue without me, I realized that I had lost not only the love of my life, but my own humanity in the pursuit of a revenge that had never been worth it.